Um, Good evening. We will make a shared presentation, so I will talk at the beginning, then Consuelo, and then I will come back. All right. Well, Chile has a very long history of housing policies, starting in 1906, but standards as such is rather a recent thing. Actually, standards became explicitly part of the way how to regulate dwelling design during the 1980s through a set of neoliberal policies that were put in place. So to understand the way how the housing model works, I think there are three main concepts that should be understood. The first one is that all the housing provided by the state all the housing should work within free market competition, and ownership is the only way to access housing. There is no other kind of housing like public housing, rental housing. No, ownership is the only form of housing. So to access ownership, the state has created a model of subsidiarity that, on the one hand, provides subsidies to the people to go to the market and buy a house, and also the other aspect is that the state never gets involved in the provision, so it is always a third party, or actually a private developer, that runs the whole procurement and the whole process from the very beginning to the end. So I would like to briefly explain the evolution of standards in Chile based on three main periods. The first one is based on through the definition of a very basic furniture schedule that creates a very minimal dwelling, almost like a shelter, I would say, during the 1980s to the 2000s. So the first model that was experimented was a semi-detached house. Then the density started to increase. So they tried a row house typology with that they could create an extra bedroom in the future, and finally a slab block typology that was actually the most proliferated one. So this is a typical plan of the slab block, where you can see how this very basic furniture is put in place, fitting very tightly and without any possibility of putting it in a different way. This kind of housing created two kind of very important problems. On the one hand, it created a massive problem of urban sprawl, creating huge neighborhoods of nothing but housing. And of course, it created a very severe problem of segregation. And on the other hand, the people, the houses were, the dwellings were really small, so the people started to make use of the communal areas to make appropriation of the public space, and to also to transform the image of the main buildings. So this led to a second period, driven mainly by at the beginning by Elemental, that they are going in favor of creating much generous dwellings, saying that a decent dwelling should be around 80 square meters, saying that was actually the DNA of the middle class. And also, to achieve that, incrementality should be considered within the standard. So the state created this new set of standards that was not only a set of or a compendium of furniture, but it and this is the most important thing, it contained the diagram of a final house, and the diagram not only in terms of the image but also in the functioning of the house, how all the program comes together as such. But as all probably know, this just never worked. It was just something really a good idea, but very little housing was built during that period, and the outcome was, I would say, kind of the same. I mean, as chaotic as the previous one that they were actually really criticizing. So the state acknowledged this problem, and also that kind of housing was only possible in the far periphery. So the state acknowledged the importance of doing housing in central areas of the city, and at the same time they realized that the first subsidized housing that they did during the 80s and 90s started to collapse, and they realized that the cost of refurbishing this housing was 7 times the money that they originally spent. So they really understood that they had to do the things in a different way. So this opened to the third and current period, I would call it, that it's about putting housing, subsidized housing in central areas of the city, which means also thinking housing in terms of high density. So the main tool to address the housing provision is mainly through a social integration policy that puts together not only, or addresses not only low-income housing, but also mid-income housing, which have been struggling for, I would say, for the last 10, 15 years to access housing. So this is really new. Like the state is not only subsidizing the most vulnerable people, but it's starting to actually to address a huge amount of people. I mean, a significant amount of the population. So and this is very important to understand that that the low income gets a kind of generic program. They always access a 2-bedroom and one bathroom flat in 52 square meters, and the mid-income, they get what they can pay. So they actually are not deciding much what kind of housing do they access. So and to make this to put both kind of subsidies together, they I don't know why. But they created 2 different standards, one for the mid-income, in theory to be applied in high-rise, and then another one for the low-income, meant to be applied to in mid-rise because of maintenance problem, precisely because of the lifts. I will stop now.
Hi everyone, and thank you, Alvaro. As he said before, I'm going to talk to you about the experience of living in this kind of houses. So we went through 8 cases. I'm not going to go into detail about each one, but I mean, we can see that they are massive, and these 8 cases works as an example of what is being built in Chile at this moment. And they were in different parts of the city. So what we want to discuss is the inhabitants' perception of their own houses. So these 8 cases, were different types of households: couple and children, couple no children, lone parent, extended family. And we asked them about these several topics, but what I want to show here is that even if we have different households compositions, we have the same program. We have, I don't know, dwellings with different numbers of rooms, but houses tend to be the same model. The logic is hierarchical. I mean, 1 main bedroom and 1 or 2 smaller bedrooms. But as we saw before, different households, of course, have different needs, but are fulfilled with the same program: 2 or 3 bedrooms and 1 or 2 bathrooms. So what do people think about their houses? At the beginning, we asked about space perception, and space perception is affected by the past houses of the inhabitants. I mean, it makes a difference if they came from, they came from an informal housing settlement, or if their last residence was their parental home, which is each one of the case, or if they rented. Also, usually they rented a room, not a full house. So they tend to think different with that on mind. So to talk about storage, people claim they don't have enough space to storage things that are not clothes, especially. They don't have a space, they think that they have to stack things upon each other, and also they ended up using another spaces of the house to put things. So, for example, this is the kind of closet area that they have. This is another case. And when we talk about storage, we are referring to the space to keep clothes, because I said this type of housing doesn't consider the storage to other items like suitcase, seasonal clothing, Christmas decorations. That things are not in mind when we are seeing this kind of housing models. And we can talk about two ways of seeing storage: not having the space, lack of space for keeping stuff, but also it's about using the correct furniture. Often people can't bring furniture they had before. In this way, this shows that standards not only apply to space, but also to the things that we need to buy to put inside our houses. For example, in this case, we are seeing that besides the closet area, this house has a lot of old furniture or from their house, their previous house, and it quite doesn't fit. And also, there's another area that ends up being like a storage space, which we can call logia, or the laundry area, which is, I think it's unique for the Chilean case, it's the space where you have your own laundry unit and sometimes your own dryer, but it's also a space where you put the gas water heating installations, because law forbids to have them inside an unventilated room or inside bathrooms. So this is a space where also people have their cleaning supplies and, as I said before, storage. So even though we have those spaces in Chile, people think that rooms could be bigger because they had to stretch to get by. I mean, although this space meets the standards, it's very limited and can only fit the appliance. It's not like a place you could stay around. About the kitchen, people have a preference for an open kitchen. It's something that most of the housing projects propose, but also when they have a partition wall, the people take that wall off to have open plan kitchens. And also they say that it's because they like to, a participant said that she doesn't like to miss the conversations going around the house, or when she's cooking, she can hear their kids. So she prefers to be in the same space with them. So this is the kind of kitchen that we see, and it's also in the same area of the living room and the dining area. This, I think, is really special to the Chilean case, that is that some projects have not done their finishing of their houses, which is a strategic allocation of resources, because you can provide more area, but you're minimizing the spending on finishing. That implies that the inhabitants are responsible of painting and flooring their own houses. Therefore, the houses end up looking very different from each other. And I think it's relevant to consider that this kind of, the level of finishing often depends on their own construction skills and how much they can spend on it. This topic, I think it's pretty interesting because after pandemic, we think that working from home looks like this. Working remotely, having a laptop, a chair, a table, and an electric outlet, like in this house. And well, she claimed that she doesn't have enough space because she's using the dining area. She doesn't have a room for it. But working from home also looks like this. This participant had a pet grooming table, a foldable table that she used in the living room, but she also had a hairdressing salon in the corridor of their house, looking up to their rooms. But also working from home looks like this. This participant had a little shop inside her house, and as you can see, they had to take off the partition wall because that was a room. So she sells goods inside the housing complex, and they took, as I said, they took the partition wall, but they use an existing window of the bedroom to run the shop without having to open the main door. So I think it's very interesting to see how working from home means different things, and we must take into account that it's not only like a laptop kind of work. And there's another thing that I think it's really, really special for the Chilean case, that is how they think about safety. We ask them, what makes you feel safe? And a participant say that the quality of the building, that we can understand living in an anti-seismic building, having a good thermal and acoustic insulation, but also means having protections against external threats, that no one is going to enter your building, that your kids can play in the enclosed area, having a concierge, cameras, intercom, knowing who's coming to your place before they knock your door. And they strongly value living in an enclosed housing complex, especially if they have children. And I think that this one is this is the kind of space the children have. And this one, for me, is like the most important thing about safety, is that safety means ownership. It's part of the imaginary of the dream of the home ownership, or as we call el sueño de la casa propia. And it also explicits the lack of regulation in terms of rental models, because people expect and desire to have their own houses, because renting is not only expensive, but also carries the risk of being kicked out. So now Alvaro can show us how practice answers these questions.
I just want to share very briefly some of my attempts to address some of the problems of housing standards in Santiago. Well, this is a project that is kind of very old. It was the first competition by the Ministry of Housing when they were just starting to think about the idea of social integration. So I did this kind of row house that could absorb the large amount of typologies that are typically considered when you for the integrated schemes, mainly through a corridor and this section that talks about the complexity that happens inside, but in fact the facade is really neutral and kind of producing this kind of more homogeneous and more integrated architectural framework, let's say. And almost 10 years later, I participated in the first attempt of the Ministry of Housing to build their own housing scheme. They didn't build it at the end because of political problems, but it was kind of the same now in, let's say, mid-rise, and the same kind of approach, how to address through one or a more articulated formal approach to put all this diversity of dwelling types together, and how to create communities. And this is another project that I'm about to finish in June, and this is really talking about I would say the current state of what the ministry they are aiming to achieve right now. In terms of they are not pushing much in terms of flats or dwelling design, but they are trying to include other kind of standards in terms of design of public space. How do you address the problem of parking? The project has 70% of underground parking. For example, commercial areas, urban space, the entrance, the interior spaces, like with specific areas for the different ages. Well, you can see how it's getting there. And also, as I was saying, this diversity, I mean, this actually looks kind of simple, but there are, I think, like 15 or 16 typologies, precisely because it's extremely over-specific, the application of standards, and that, I would say, that overcomplicates the whole thing. Well, and how this neutrality kind of absorbs that problem. Other aspect that they're really trying to achieve is from the ministry is like energetic certification, and for example, all these vertical elements for solar control, and for example, they are really trying to have a more versatile facades and the use of balconies. And just to finish, I would like to share, this is a competition that I stepped out, but I think this is a really important at the end of my practice, trying to kind of break the approach to the design of dwelling design at the scale of the dwelling unit, and some very specific part of the Ministry of Housing. They're trying to push for better standards. They're asking for larger space for the dining area, larger space for I don't know, space for larger bedrooms, and so on. So instead of addressing the dwelling design in a differentiated manner, I mean, the relationship between, for example, this approach and the house is kind of the same. So I thought, okay, but what if I try to do the opposite, how to try to create the most neutral and perhaps the most successful dwelling solution that you can find in the private market, which is we call it the butterfly plan. So I developed this kind of slab block with the underground or half sunken underground parking, which it has a very, I mean, the costs are reduced to half of it, and it's a significant part of the problem. But instead of having 6, 7 housing typologies, what if we have only 2? But how is these 2 could address yes, all the needs or typical needs? So instead of having dwellings from 45 to 60 or 58, what if the main difference is the number of bathrooms? And also to have to achieve this kind of neutrality that is given by the butterfly plan. But instead of only think about this solution as a static thing that could actually allow for empty plan, one bedroom, 2 bedroom, 3 bedroom, 4 bedroom, but that could actually allow for much more flexibility, versatility, without necessarily increasing the size of the flat, which is really critical, because the bigger is the flat, the less number of housing provision is. So I would leave it like just right here. Thank you very much.